You've entered Void of Rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple. Subscribe. We're almost at 4,000 corrupted souls, but the Void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion, or face the consequences of defying the Void? Now let's jump into today's story. The clock on my desk reads 2:17 AM, but time has lost all meaning. I've been staring at this blank document for 3 hours, my fingers hovering over keys that might as well be instruments of confession. Outside my window, Fort Dominion sleeps the uneasy sleep of soldiers, but I know they're coming for me soon. The floorboards in the corridor have been creaking for the past 20 minutes, not the random settling of an old building, but the deliberate pattern of combat boots moving with military precision. My name is Father Thomas Aldric, and for 15 years I've been telling myself I serve God. Tonight, I learned I've been serving something else entirely. The coffee beside my laptop has formed a skin, untouched since I brewed it at midnight. My hands shake too violently to risk lifting the cup, and besides, I don't think I'll need the caffeine. What I have to tell you will keep me awake forever, assuming I live long enough to finish writing it. I need to start with David Chen, because Chen was where it all began, even though I didn't understand it at the time. Chen found me in my quarters 3 hours before his squad was set to raid a Taliban compound in the Korangal Valley. It was October 13th, 2019, a date I've memorized along with too many others. He stood in my doorway like a man approaching the confessional, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a way that reminded me he was barely 22 years old. "Father," he said, his voice carrying that particular tension that comes before men do terrible things in the name of good. "We're hitting a high-value target tomorrow night. Intel says they've got American hostages, maybe kids from that aid convoy that went missing. He paused, looking down at boots he'd polished to mirror brightness. "I need to know God sees what we're doing, that he knows why we have to do it." I set down the field manual I'd been reading and really looked at Chen. Crew cut so precise it could have been measured with a ruler, uniform pressed despite the forward operating base's limitations. A photograph of a little girl with pigtails taped inside his helmet. His file said he'd grown up in a trailer park in Ohio, joined the army to pay for college, sent half his paycheck home to his mother every month. The kind of soldier who still wrote actual letters on paper because his grandmother didn't trust email. "David," I said, placing my hand on his shoulder and feeling the coiled tension in his muscles, "you carry the Lord's light into places where darkness has taken root. When you strike tomorrow, you strike with divine righteousness. Every round you fire, every blade you draw, every life you take, you do it all in his holy name, and he will guide your hand true." The change in Chen was immediate and profound. His shoulders straightened, the tight lines around his eyes relaxed, and for the first time since he'd entered my quarters, he smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd been carrying a crushing weight and suddenly found the strength to bear it. "Thank you, Father," he said, and his voice carried a note of genuine relief. "That means everything. I was starting to think, well, it doesn't matter now. God's with us." Chen left my quarters walking taller, and I felt the warm satisfaction that comes from shepherding a lost soul back to faith. I had no idea I'd just signed a death warrant written in heavenly blood. The raid was everything a military operation should be. Chen's team inserted without detection, neutralized 12 enemy combatants, and recovered 3 American hostages: a doctor, a nurse, and an aid worker who'd been held for 6 weeks. 0 friendly casualties, mission objectives exceeded, commendations all around. The after-action report noted Chen's exceptional performance. He personally accounted for 3 enemy kills with his combat knife, moving through the compound like divine wrath given form. Witnesses reported he'd quoted scripture as he fought, shouting Psalm 144 between blade thrusts, "Blessed be the Lord my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight." I should have felt proud. I should have seen God's hand in the mission's success, should have celebrated the rescued lives and the evil destroyed. Instead, that night I fell into a dream that changed everything I thought I knew about faith, war, and the price of righteousness. I was standing in a cathedral that defied every law of physics and architecture I'd ever learned. The ceiling stretched upward beyond the reach of sight, disappearing into a darkness so complete it seemed to devour light itself. The walls were lined with alcoves, each one containing an angel carved from stone that pulsed with inner radiance. These weren't the chubby cherubs of Renaissance art, or the gentle guardians of greeting cards. These were warriors of heaven, each one unique, each one terrible and beautiful beyond human comprehension. 6 wings spread in eternal praise, eyes like burning stars that soar into the heart of all creation, faces that held the wisdom of eons and the fierce love of the divine. Some carried flaming swords, others held trumpets or scrolls, or instruments I couldn't name. Each one radiated power that made the air itself sing with harmonies I felt in my bones. As I stood there, overwhelmed by their majesty, one of the angels began to change. It started with a sound I'll never forget, a crystalline scream that spoke of agony beyond mortal understanding. Cracks appeared across the angel's perfect form, hair-thin lines that spread like a spider's web across marble skin. Its wings, spread wide in eternal worship, began to crumble. Feathers of pure light fell from them, each one dissolving before it touched the cathedral floor. The angel's face, which had shown nothing but serene devotion for countless millennia, contorted with terror and pain. Its star-bright eyes went wide with an emotion no heavenly being should ever know, the awful realization of falling from grace. I watched in horror as the entire statue collapsed into dust. Where it had stood, only emptiness remained, a cold void in the perfect symmetry of the holy place. But worse than the absence was what filled it. A pull, a sucking darkness that seemed to reach for my soul with invisible fingers. Then I heard the singing. From somewhere far below, echoing up through what might have been miles of stone, came voices raised in celebration. Not the pure harmonies of heavenly choirs, but something else entirely. The sound of triumph tinged with malice, joy twisted into something that made my skin crawl. I woke screaming, my hands clutched around something that burned like ice against my palms. When I forced my fingers open, a single white feather lay there, perfect and terrible in its beauty. As I watched, it began to smoke and crumble, dissolving into ash that the air conditioning carried away like the remnants of a prayer. I told myself it was stress, combat deployment, the weight of responsibility, too much strong coffee and not enough sleep. But the dream came back the next night, and the night after that. Each time I noticed details I'd missed before. The cathedral had hundreds of alcoves, but some of them were empty. Dark spaces where angels had once stood, cold voids that seemed to whisper of loss and abandonment. They transferred me to Iraq 11 months later. New desert, same war, same job. I threw myself into routine, trying to forget Afghanistan and focus on my duties. The base chapel was smaller than the one I'd left behind, but it had the same worn wooden pews and the same sense of sanctuary that military chapels always carried. I convinced myself I was starting fresh. Then Captain Isabella Rodriguez came to see me. Rodriguez was career military in the truest sense, a woman who'd earned every scar and every commendation through 15 years of hard service. She'd lost 2 fingers to an IED in her first deployment, walked away from a helicopter crash in her second, and taken shrapnel in 3 different firefights. She stood in my office doorway like she was reporting to a superior officer, not asking a favor from a priest. "Father," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd learned command through blood and sacrifice. "We're moving on an ISIS cell tomorrow. High-value targets, including the animal who's been making those execution videos with American prisoners. My men are good, but they're scared. They've seen what these bastards do to captives, and it's eating at them." She paused, and for just a moment, the professional mask slipped. I saw the weight she carried, the responsibility for the lives under her command, the terrible arithmetic of war that demanded she send good people into harm's way. I need to know that when I put a bullet in that terrorist's head, I'm doing it with God's blessing. My men need to know their cause is righteous. Every instinct I'd developed over 15 years of ministry told me to give her what she needed. Faith was my weapon against the darkness of war. Blessing was my gift to those who bore arms in service of good. But something deep in my chest was screaming at me to refuse, to tell her to find another way, another chaplain, another blessing. I looked at Rodriguez's face, saw the desperate hope barely concealed behind professional composure, and couldn't deny her. "Captain," I said, the words feeling strange and heavy in my mouth, "you are the sword of the righteous, the shield of the innocent. When you strike tomorrow, you strike in the name of justice itself. God will guide your hand, and your bullets will find their mark by divine will." Rodriguez actually stood straighter, some invisible weight lifting from her shoulders. "Thank you, Father. That's exactly what I needed to hear." The mission launched at 3 a.m. on a moonless night. Rodriguez's team moved through the abandoned industrial district like ghosts, their night vision turning the world into green-tinted clarity. They found the ISIS cell exactly where intelligence had placed them, holed up in a bombed-out textile factory, surrounded by the detritus of a civilization torn apart by war. The firefight was brief but intense. Rodriguez personally cornered the cell leader in what had once been a school classroom, surrounded by children's drawings, still clinging to the walls despite years of conflict. The man had beheaded 6 American prisoners on camera, each execution more brutal than the last, and his laptop contained plans for attacks on civilian targets across 3 countries. As Rodriguez pressed her sidearm to his temple, she spoke in a voice that carried across the battlefield. "This is for every innocent you butchered, for every child you orphaned, for every family you destroyed. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, may God have mercy on your soul, because I won't." The gunshot echoed through the empty factory at 3:47 a.m. At that exact moment, 312 miles away, I collapsed during evening prayer. The pain that lanced through my chest felt like being struck by lightning channeled through a crucifix. Every piece of religious art in the chapel cracked simultaneously. Not just small fractures, but deep, jagged breaks that spoke of violence done to holy things. The wooden crucifix above the altar didn't just break. It exploded into splinters with a sound like thunder. The soldiers who'd been praying nearby swore they heard something else in that moment, the sound of something massive falling from an impossible height, wings tearing as it plummeted. Private Williams, a kid from Arkansas who attended every service, grabbed my arm as I struggled to stand. "Father, what was that? What just happened?" I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't have answers for anyone, least of all myself. That night the vision returned with terrifying clarity, but this time I wasn't alone in the cathedral. A figure in blood-stained robes stood at the altar, ancient beyond measure, his face hidden beneath a hood that cast shadows deeper than the darkness around us. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries and the authority of absolute conviction. "Each death sanctified in his name opens a door, Thomas. Each prayer of war loosens another chain that binds the armies of darkness. You begin to understand, don't you? What you call righteousness has always been something far more calculated. I found my voice in that space between dreams and revelation. Who are you? I am Cardinal Francesco Toretti, architect of the Fourth Crusade's greatest triumph and most terrible secret. He gestured to the empty alcoves where angels had once stood. I made the pact that you now serve, unknowing and faithful as any tool should be. What pact? I whispered. The angelfall doctrine. Every soul, taken in God's name by a warrior blessed by the church, feeds a mechanism older than Christianity itself. Every prayer you speak, every blessing you give, every righteous kill you sanctify. It all serves the same purpose, to empty heaven of its defenders, one angel at a time. The cathedral around us seemed to pulse with his words, and I could see more clearly now. Hundreds of empty alcoves, dark spaces where divine guardians had once stood watch. The mathematics of it hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible, I said, but even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't. Is it? Look around you, priest. Count the empty spaces. How many soldiers have you blessed? How many missions have you sanctified? How many righteous kills have you enabled? His laughter was like the sound of grinding bone. The Crusades were never about reclaiming Holy Land. The Inquisition was never about preserving pure faith. They were about this systematically weakening heaven's defenses while convincing the faithful they were doing God's work. But why? The question tore from my throat. Why would the church agree to such a thing? Because power corrupts, Thomas, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The church wanted to rule without divine interference, to be the sole arbiters of God's will on earth. What better way than to remove heaven's ability to intervene? We told ourselves we were bringing order to chaos, that human authority was more reliable than divine mystery. I tried to speak, to argue, but Toretti raised a hand stained with what looked like dried blood. The mechanism became self-sustaining centuries ago. It no longer requires conscious cooperation from the church hierarchy. Any kill made in God's name by someone blessed by ordained clergy continues the cycle, regardless of their knowledge or intent. You've been an unwitting servant of hell's greatest victory, Thomas, the weaponization of faith itself. I woke up choking on the taste of ash and copper, my sheets soaked with sweat that stank of sulphur. Syria came next in 2021, and with it Lieutenant Connor Hayes. By then, I was actively trying to refuse blessing requests, but soldiers have a way of finding chaplains when desperation drives them. Hayes caught me in the chapel at 11:43 p.m, kneeling before the cracked crucifix and trying to pray through the static that had taken up permanent residence in my head. Hayes was fresh from West Point, 23 years old, with the kind of crisp bearing that comes from 4 years of military academy discipline. But his eyes held something older, something that spoke of burdens no young man should carry. His uniform was perfect, his posture textbook correct, and his hands shook like leaves in a hurricane. "Father," he whispered, glancing around the empty chapel, as if enemy snipers might be hiding behind the pews. "My squad's been taking heavy casualties. We've lost 3 good men this week, Morrison, Patel, and Jackson. Tomorrow, I have to make a shot that'll either save my remaining soldiers or get us all killed." He paused, swallowing hard. The target is a Syrian commander who's been coordinating attacks on refugee convoys. Civilians, Father. Women and children trying to escape this hellhole. I know this sounds selfish, but I need to know God's watching out for us. I need to know that when I kill this bastard, I'm doing it for the right reasons. I should have walked away. Should have told him to find another chaplain, another blessing, another path to the absolution he sought. But Hayes was trembling like a beaten dog, and his eyes held the same desperate faith I'd seen in hundreds of other young soldiers. "Lieutenant," I said, each word feeling like swallowing molten glass, "your cause is just, and your heart is pure. The innocent cry out for protection. and you are God's answer to their prayers. When you take that shot tomorrow, you take it with the Lord's blessing. His hand will guide your bullet, and His justice will be done." The transformation was immediate. Hayes's shoulders straightened, the tremor left his hands, and something like peace settled over his features. "Thank you, Father. I knew if I could just hear you say it, everything would be all right." Hayes made his shot at 13:47 hours the next day, 817 yards in a crosswind that should have made accuracy impossible, threading the needle between two buildings to take out a target visible for less than 3 seconds. The bullet struck the Syrian commander center mass as he emerged from a building where he'd been planning the massacre of a refugee camp. The moment the round found its mark, I felt something rip loose in my chest, like a rope snapping under too much weight. The sensation was followed immediately by a sound I'd been dreading. Distant singing, triumphant and terrible, echoing up from depths I didn't want to contemplate. This time, when the vision came, I was already standing in the cathedral before I realized I was no longer awake. The space was horrifyingly empty now. Maybe a dozen angels remained in alcoves that had once housed hundreds, and they were all looking at me with expressions of such profound betrayal that I wanted to crawl into the earth and disappear. One of them, its marble face cracked, but still achingly beautiful, spoke with a voice like wind through broken glass. "Thomas Aldric, do you comprehend what you have done?" "I bless soldiers," I said. "I gave them faith to do what was necessary." "You gave them permission," the angel replied, and there was infinite sadness in its tone. "Permission to kill in God's name, knowing that each death would cast one of us into the abyss. We who have sung His praises since the first dawn, we who have never known sin or doubt or fear, we fall because of your prayers." Around us, the cathedral shuddered, as if struck by some massive blow. Through the soaring windows, I could see movement in the darkness beyond, shapes that rejoiced in our conversation, forms that danced in celebration of heaven's emptying. "How many?" I whispered. "Count the empty spaces, priest. Count your blessed soldiers and their righteous kills. Count the missions you sanctified and the deaths you enabled. We thought perhaps you would stop, that you would see the truth and break the cycle. But you continued, faithful servant to the very end." The weight of mathematics crashed down on me like a collapsing building. 15 years of service, 437 individual soldiers blessed. Conservative estimates put their confirmed kills at over 3,000 enemy combatants, each one dispatched with my words echoing in their ears. 3,000 angels cast down because I'd wanted to comfort scared young men with holy words. "There must be something I can do," I said, "some way to fix this." The angel's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I saw not judgment but something approaching pity. "There is one path spoken of in the oldest texts, the martyr's reversal. If a blessed soul sacrifices themselves while truly repenting every death they enabled, truly feeling the pain of each fallen brother, some of us might be restored. But the cost?" It looked at me with eyes like dying stars. "The cost is experiencing every moment of every angel's fall, feeling each death as if it were your own body breaking, your own light being extinguished. 3,000 deaths, Thomas. 3,000 agonies beyond mortal comprehension. And even if you survive the process, even if some of us are restored, the mechanism remains. The next chaplain will continue the work, as will the one after that." I looked around the devastated cathedral, at the void where beauty and holiness had once resided. "Maybe, but I have to try." The angel nodded slowly. "Then you understand at last what true service means." I woke up screaming and didn't stop for 3 hours. Back at Fort Dominion, I threw myself into research with the desperation of a drowning man reaching for driftwood. The base library had surprisingly extensive theological collections, and what it lacked I could access through military databases and academic networks. I dug through centuries of church history, following threads that led deeper and deeper into darkness. I found Cardinal Toretti's true legacy buried in documents that should have been destroyed centuries ago. During the Fourth Crusade, while the world's attention was focused on the conquest of Constantinople, Toretti had made contact with something ancient and hungry in the spaces between stars. The entity called itself the Architect of Sorrows, and it offered him a bargain that would reshape the spiritual landscape of Earth forever. Use God's name to sanctify killing, the entity promised, and each death would weaken heaven's defenses. Not immediately, not obviously, but one angel at a time. The goal was patient and perfect, turn humanity's greatest source of comfort and strength into hell's most effective weapon. Toretti accepted the bargain with the cold calculation of a man who'd convinced himself that human authority was more reliable than divine mystery. He crafted the ritual carefully, weaving it into existing church doctrine so seamlessly that future generations would perform it without knowing its true purpose. Every blessing given to soldiers, every prayer spoken over weapons, every kill sanctified in God's name, would feed the machine he'd built. The church discovered Toretti's pact eventually, but by then the corruption had metastasized beyond any hope of surgical removal. The mechanism had become self-perpetuating, woven into the very fabric of military chaplaincy. Any priest who blessed soldiers, any kill made in God's name by someone carrying those blessings, would continue the cycle, regardless of the chaplain's knowledge or intentions. For 800 years, the angelful doctrine had operated in perfect secrecy, hidden behind the noble facade of providing spiritual comfort to warriors. Every crusade, every religious war, every blessed bullet had contributed to the same goal, emptying heaven of its defenders while humanity convinced itself it was doing God's work. I calculated my personal contribution with the same precision I'd once used for supply requisitions. 15 years of service across 4 combat deployments, 437 individual soldiers blessed, from green recruits seeking courage to hardened veterans looking for absolution. Their confirmed kills, based on after-action reports I could access, totaled 3,247 enemy combatants. 3,247 angels cast down because I'd wanted to bring comfort to young men facing death in foreign lands. But there was more. The research led me to classified documents that painted an even more horrifying picture. Military chaplains weren't the only vectors for the doctrine. Police chaplains blessing officers, prison chaplains ministering to guards, even civilian priests offering prayers for soldiers' families, all of it fed into the same mechanism. The web was vast, intricate, and completely invisible to those caught within it. I cross-referenced databases I probably shouldn't have had access to, tracking the correlation between military chaplain deployments and what intelligence agencies euphemistically called anomalous atmospheric phenomena. The pattern was undeniable. Every major military operation with embedded chaplains was followed by reports of meteorological irregularities, streaks of light falling from clear skies, unexplained thunder, the scent of burning filling the air with no identifiable source. The angels had been falling for centuries, and we'd written it off as weather. That final night, I didn't need to sleep for the vision to come. The cathedral materialized around me while I sat at my desk, still fully awake and staring at research that had shattered every assumption I'd ever held about faith, duty, and service. The vast space was completely empty now, every alcove bare, every choir stall vacant. The silence was so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing against my skull. Then I heard footsteps, not the soft whisper of bare feet or the measured tread of boots, but the sharp click of cloven hooves on marble. The sound echoed through the empty cathedral with the rhythm of a funeral march, each step marking another moment of heaven's defeat. A voice like grinding stone and burning oil filled the sacred space, speaking with the satisfaction of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. Magnificent work, Father Thomas Aldric. Truly magnificent. 15 years of faithful service and you never suspected a thing. Heaven stands empty. Hell overflows with new recruits, and earth lies defenseless beneath skies that no longer hold guardians. All because you wanted to comfort scared young men with pretty words about righteousness and divine purpose. Something stepped out of the shadows behind the altar. Not quite human, not quite anything else. It wore shapes the way I might wear clothes, discarding and adopting forms as it spoke. Sometimes it appeared as a cardinal in blood-stained robes, sometimes as a general in an army uniform I didn't recognize, sometimes as nothing more than a darkness that hurt to perceive directly. Did you really think your ignorance absolved you? It continued, and its laughter was the sound of civilization's ending. That good intentions could cleanse corruption? You have been our finest servant, Thomas Aldric, blessing our work with divine authority for over a decade. Every prayer you spoke was a nail in heaven's coffin, every blessing a step closer to our ultimate victory. You're the architect of sorrows, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded in that place of cosmic horror. Among other names, yes, I am the whisper that convinced Toretti to make his bargain, the voice that guided the doctrine's creation, the hand that has shaped 8 centuries of holy war. And you, faithful priest, have been my unwitting apostle. There has to be a way to fix this, I said. The texts mention the martyr's reversal. The entity's amusement was palpable, filling the cathedral like poisonous gas. Oh yes, the martyr's reversal. Your ancient books speak truly of this path to redemption. A blessed soul can indeed restore the fallen, but they must die experiencing every moment of every angel's suffering. 3,247 deaths, Thomas. 3,247 separate agonies, each one felt as if it were your own body being torn apart, your own divine light being extinguished forever. It moved closer, and I could smell sulfur and burnt feathers. But even if you somehow survive the process, even if some angels are restored through your sacrifice, do you think it will matter? The mechanism remains intact. The next chaplain will carry on the work within hours of your death, as will the one after that and the one after that. You would die for nothing, priest, a gesture of defiance that changes absolutely nothing. I looked around the empty cathedral, at the void where beauty and holiness had once resided, and felt something like peace settle over me for the first time in months. Maybe, I said, but it's the right thing to do, and sometimes that has to be enough. For the first time since our conversation began, the entity's amusement faded. You would die for strangers, for beings you helped damn. I would die to undo what I've done, I replied, whether it changes anything or not. The architect of sorrows studied me with senses that operated beyond normal perception, and I felt its attention like acid on my soul. Interesting. In 800 years of operating the doctrine, I have never encountered a servant willing to make such a sacrifice. Perhaps there is more to humanity than I credited. Does that change anything? No, it said, but something in its tone suggested otherwise. The mechanism is beyond any individual's power to break, but your sacrifice might complicate future operations. The angels you restore will remember why they fell, and they will be watching for the doctrine's signs. I nodded, understanding that this was as close to hope as I was likely to get. Then I'd better get started. The entity began to fade, but its voice lingered in the empty cathedral. Goodbye, Thomas Aldric. You have been a better enemy than most of my servants were allies. I'm finishing this account now. It's 4:31 a.m, and the footsteps in the hallway have stopped outside my door. Through the thin walls, I can hear hushed voices and the metallic click of weapons being readied. They think I've lost my mind, that combat stress has finally broken the base chaplain. They're probably not wrong, but they're not right either. The manuscript I found describes the martyr's reversal in clinical detail that would make a medical examiner proud. The blessed soul must confess each death they enabled, experiencing simultaneously the victim's final moments and the corresponding angel's fall from grace. If their repentance is genuine, if they truly understand the weight of what they've done, and accept full responsibility for their role in heaven's emptying, some of the damage might be undone. Whether it will work, I don't know. Whether it will be enough to change anything in the long term, I doubt. But a man who's helped empty heaven has certain obligations that transcend questions of effectiveness or futility. I can hear them at the door now, voices growing urgent as they decide how to proceed. Time to go. If you find this document, if you serve in any capacity where violence is sanctified by holy words, remember this. God's name is not a magic incantation that makes killing righteous. It's a responsibility that makes every death sacred, every loss a wound in the fabric of creation. The road to hell isn't paved with good intentions. It's built on blessed weapons and sanctified murders, on prayers that turn faith into a weapon against the very heaven we claim to serve. Question everything you're told about divine will and righteous warfare. Ask yourself whether the comfort you provide to soldiers comes at a cost you can't see, whether the strength you give them to kill serves purposes you never intended. Remember that every word spoken in God's name carries weight in realms beyond human understanding, and that weight accumulates over time into burdens that can break the backs of angels. The cycle will continue after I'm gone. Other chaplains will bless other soldiers, never knowing they're feeding a machine designed to empty heaven itself. But maybe, if I can restore even a few of the fallen, those angels will find ways to warn their successors. Maybe someone will recognize the signs and break free from the doctrine's influence. Maybe this confession will reach someone who can do what I never could. Refuse the blessing, break the chain, and choose human doubt over divine certainty. The door is opening now. I can see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, hear voices calling my name, with the careful tone people use when addressing the potentially dangerous. It's time. May God forgive me for what I didn't know, and may hell release what I helped drag down into darkness. Father Thomas Aldric was found deceased in the base chapel at 4:47 a.m. on Thursday, March 15th, 2024. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, though the medical examiner's report noted several anomalies. Aldric's body showed no signs of trauma, but his face was locked in an expression of indescribable agony, and his hands were clenched so tightly that his fingernails drew blood from his palms. Most puzzling was the temperature of his skin, which remained cold to the touch for over 6 hours after death despite the chapel's warm temperature. Multiple personnel reported unusual phenomena during the night of Aldric's death. Sergeant Williams, who was on guard duty, described the sound of rushing wind, with no identifiable source, followed by what he characterized as singing that seemed to come from very far away, like voices calling across an impossible distance. The base's meteorological instruments recorded unexplained atmospheric disturbances between 4:30 and 5:15 a.m., including electromagnetic anomalies that temporarily disrupted radio communications. Most remarkably, the angel statue in the base chapel underwent what can only be described as a miraculous restoration. The marble sculpture, which had been cracked and damaged for over a decade following a mortar attack in 2013, was discovered fully intact the morning after Aldric's death. The stone showed no signs of repair work, and the craftsmanship appeared to exceed even the statue's original quality. Several personnel noted that the angel's face now bore what appeared to be rips carved into the marble, rips that had not been present in the original sculpture. Staff Sergeant Chen, who had served under Aldric in Afghanistan, visited the chapel 3 days after the chaplain's death. He reported an unsettling experience. "I went to pay my respects, you know. Father Aldric was a good man, helped me through some dark times. But when I looked at that statue, I swear I could see something moving in the ribs, like there was light inside the marble, trying to get out. And for just a second, I thought I heard him, Father Aldric, whispering something about forgiveness and the price of blessing." Perhaps most significantly, within 1 week of Aldric's death, 7 soldiers approached the replacement chaplain, Father Morrison, requesting blessings for upcoming missions. However, these requests were made with unusual specificity. Each soldier asked detailed questions about the theological implications of their requests, the historical context of military blessings, and whether Father Morrison had studied what they called the old doctrines. When pressed for clarification, the soldiers claimed they had experienced shared dreams of an empty cathedral and a voice warning them about prayers that damn more than they save. Father Morrison, a veteran chaplain with 20 years of experience, noted in his private journal that these conversations were unlike anything he had encountered in his career. The soldiers seemed genuinely troubled by something more than normal pre-mission anxiety, he wrote. They speak of feeling watched, of sensing a presence during prayer that makes them question the very foundations of blessed warfare. Several have requested to study historical church documents about military chaplaincy, as if they're searching for something specific. The changes at Fort Dominion extend beyond individual soldiers. Weapons blessed by Father Morrison have reportedly malfunctioned at critical moments, with no identifiable mechanical causes. Radio communications during missions frequently carry what operators describe as interference that sounds almost like singing. Most puzzling, thermal imaging equipment has begun detecting what appear to be human-shaped heat signatures in areas where no personnel are present, signatures that seem to be watching ongoing operations with what one technical specialist characterized as obvious disapproval. Intelligence analysts reviewing these reports have noted correlation with similar phenomena at military installations worldwide. Bases with recently deceased chaplains are reporting unprecedented levels of what internal memos carefully term spiritual unrest among combat personnel. Soldiers are questioning orders more frequently, requesting detailed justifications for mission parameters, and expressing concerns about the moral implications of their actions that go far beyond normal ethical considerations. The architect of sorrows was right about one thing. Thomas Aldric's sacrifice has complicated future operations. The angels restored through his martyrdom remember everything about their fall, and they are taking active steps to prevent others from sharing their fate. They whisper warnings in dreams, influence equipment failures at crucial moments, and plant seeds of doubt in the minds of those who would carry forward the angel fall doctrine. But the mechanism remains intact. Military chaplains continue to bless soldiers, police chaplains continue to pray with officers, and prison chaplains continue to minister to guards. The vast majority remain ignorant of the doctrine's true purpose, faithfully serving what they believe to be God's will, while feeding a machine designed to empty heaven itself. The war between knowledge and ignorance, between divine warning and institutional momentum, continues in bases and churches and police stations around the world. Each day brings new reports of spiritual anomalies among military personnel, but the machine grinds on, consuming faith and producing damnation with mechanical efficiency. Yet something has changed in the restored statue's marble ribs. Some say they can see reflections of other worlds, glimpses of empty alcoves being slowly, painfully refilled with light. The angels Aldric saved through his sacrifice worked tirelessly to warn others, appearing in dreams and visions to those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Father Morrison received one such warning 3 months after Aldric's death. he found himself standing in a cathedral that stretched beyond sight, facing a figure in blood-stained combat fatigues whose face bore the unmistakable features of the dead chaplain. "Richard," Aldric said, using Morrison's first name, though they had never met, "you have a choice to make. Continue blessing soldiers and feed the machine that damns angels, or break the cycle and save what remains of heaven's host." "But how?" Morrison asked. "How can I refuse to comfort those who need faith to face death?" "Comfort them with truth instead of pretty lies," Aldric replied. "Tell them that God's love doesn't require his name on their weapons. That righteousness comes from protecting the innocent, not from sanctifying the killing of enemies. The moment you bless a kill, you damn another angel. The moment you refuse, you break a chain that has bound heaven for 8 centuries. Morrison woke with tears on his cheeks and a choice before him. When the next soldier came seeking blessing for a mission, the replacement chaplain looked into young eyes filled with faith and fear and spoke words that would have made Aldric proud. "Son, God's love goes with you always, but his name isn't a weapon to be wielded. Your courage comes from your heart, your skill from your training, and your protection from your brothers in arms. I won't bless your bullets, but I'll pray for your safe return, and for the wisdom to know when mercy serves better than violence." The soldier left confused but somehow relieved, and for the first time in 800 years, a military mission was conducted without the angel-fall doctrine's influence. No angels fell that day. In heaven's slowly refilling halls, marble began to reform in empty alcoves, and something like hope stirred in the spaces between stars. The cycle can be broken. Aldric proved that with his sacrifice, and Morrison proved it with his choice. But the mechanism remains vast and entrenched, operated by thousands of chaplains who serve unknowingly in darkness. Each one who awakens to the truth helps turn the tide, but the war is far from over. If you wear a collar or carry a cross, if soldiers come to you seeking God's blessing for their weapons, remember Father Thomas Aldric. Remember that every word spoken in the Lord's name carries weight in realms beyond human understanding. Remember that sometimes the most faithful act is to refuse the blessing, to break the chain, and to trust that God's love needs no weapon to make it real. The angels are watching now, fewer than before, but more vigilant than ever. They remember the price of their fall and the cost of their restoration. In their marble tears and whispered warnings, in equipment that fails at crucial moments, and dreams that shake the foundations of blessed warfare, they continue Aldric's work. The angel fall doctrine endures, but it no longer operates in perfect secrecy. The truth spreads like light in darkness, one awakened conscience at a time. And in heaven's slowly healing halls, the sound of falling has been replaced by something else entirely, the sound of wings returning home. The war between heaven and hell was never meant to be fought with human weapons, blessed by human priests. It was meant to be fought with choices, the choice to show mercy instead of vengeance, to protect instead of destroy, to love instead of hate. Every time someone refuses to sanctify killing in God's name, they strike a blow against 8 centuries of corruption. Every time someone chooses faith over fear, they help restore what was lost. Every time someone remembers that God's name is not a weapon, another angel spreads its wings in heaven's endless halls. The cycle can be broken, the chain can be shattered, the machine can be stopped, but only if enough people choose to stop feeding it, one blessed bullet at a time. Remember Father Thomas Aldric, who died to save what he had unknowingly helped destroy. Remember the choice that every chaplain faces, whether they know it or not. Remember that heaven is watching and counting, and hoping that humanity will finally choose to serve God with empty hands instead of blessed weapons. The angels are coming home. The question is, will there be a heaven left for them to return to by the time the last chaplain awakens to the truth? That choice lies with every person who speaks God's name in the presence of those who kill. Choose wisely. Choose faithfully. Choose knowing that every word carries the weight of eternity. The angels are counting on it.